The Edgeless Swordsman here is April 1st, 2022. This video will be about Novo resources in light of the financial results that were just announced. First of all, these are results from 2021, with a particular focus on Q4 2021. So this is not a snapshot of what is happening. This is a snapshot of what has already happened more than 3 months ago. But I expected Venus Creek to be, underperforming, especially since, there were a lot of troubles in Q4, if I remember correctly. When was it that the ball mill lining broke? I think that was Q4. And they had to raise a tailings dam last year, etc. So there's, I hope and think there's, some non-recurring costs that basically bloated the cost column that we will not need to address in the future, basically, because obviously one would expect that as a team, etc., operators get more and more experience with anything, really. They become better at handling it and better at the processes involved, etc. But not a pretty quarter, not a pretty year at all. Venus Creek has been a money-losing operation, and they spent 12.1 million on exploration, etc. So I'm certainly not an expert on mining itself, or corporate finance, etc. But even I can spot that these are very high cost numbers, etc. So that's one thing. One thing, obviously, and this has been the main focus of everyone, pretty much. 95% of the talk, I would say, last months have been on Venus Creek and the next. The next financial update or operational update, etc. So this is obviously something that the Mr. Market, is focusing a lot on. I'm not focusing too much on this. I will explain why. First of all, this is a chart of Novo resources. The current market cap is around 260 million. You can clearly see a capped downtrend, basically, and again, I think this is also a good proxy for the sentiment that as long as people expect BC to be underperforming, etc., it's just been a whopper of a negative bias. In some respects, very understandable. I mean, a money losing operation when you have debt, etc. It's obviously that's risky. I mean, you can go bankrupt, obviously, but at the same time, it's like, well, I think this case would be completely different if it weren't for the equity holdings, etc. As of the time of me doing this video, the shares of Newfound Gold are worth 114 million. We have other equities, some private still, like Elementum. I think they're at minimum worth around 20 million, probably more, not 100% sure, but let's stick with 20, why not? So that's 134 million. Then of course we have the Golden Eagle Mill, and or Gold Eagle Mill, I don't even remember the name, which, I mean, I don't remember the exact purchasing price we paid for it, over 100 million. Given the cost creep in the industry, the inflation in all raw materials, basically, and equipment. I mean, we've seen capex blowouts for miner after miner, basically. Lately, I remember Argonaut Gold, which I think they had to. I don't know what specifically was tied to what, but I seem to remember that they mentioned the overall inflation in equipment and such. So I mean, to let's say in terms of sunk costs, I mean inflation obviously works well if you have real assets because they just rise in nominal terms. So in light of that, it's like, okay, what would it cost to build the Golden Eagle mill today? My bet is way over 200 million. If I had to guess, closer to 300 million. So that's obviously an asset that's going up in replacement value as inflation goes up. So it's like when you consider that scenario, it's like if Novo had done the same things, let's say, kind of same things, it would obviously be better to have bought it when they did, before the rise of costs in everything pretty much. So that's at least something that's a bit okay. It's like, that's pretty much real estate. Now I don't know what it would fetch in an actual sale, etc. It's just for Novo specifically to build a new plant today would probably cost a lot more than we paid for it back then. So I think really that's a silver lining, because if you have it, like real estate or whatever hard assets, it gets revalued higher with the rise in cost to actually build it. So we have that going for us at least. And it's like I see some people guessing what share price might do tomorrow. I mean, I think, well, I personally think, I mean, this shouldn't be that of a surprise that last year was bad and Q4 was bad. But you never know. My thesis lately has been that I expect BC to underperform. Now I don't know what BC is doing exactly right now or the last 3 months. It's just I thought that this report, which covered last year, would be bad, and that I personally expect a bottom sometime around here. And since I'm a value investor, I'll explain why. Some people are throwing around that it will flash crash or crash to 80 cents tomorrow, for example. In that case, Novo would have a market cap of 197 million Canadian. 134 of that would be backed up by equities, so that would be 63 million left for the mill and every project, etc., that Novo has. I mean, to me that is absolutely beyond dirt cheap, and it would be a completely different picture if Novo had no equities, because this, as I see it, is basically a battery, a reserve fund, let's say. So I mean, even if BC were to underperform, I don't know, if it lost 3 million per month, I mean, you could survive quite a long time, and you could do stuff in the meantime. And in light of that, I mean, if Newfound Gold just, let's say, broke out of this downtrend here and just went back to 52-week highs, I'm saying just, I mean, I can't guarantee that will happen, obviously. But since they keep on hitting, etc., and it appears that the Queensway project is growing, and I think we're in for a very solid gold and mining bull in the not too distant future. I mean, I think miners have already bottomed. Newmont Mining is making just touched a new all-time high. It surpassed its 1987 high, so that's a 35-year new all-time high in the making. I think that's a pretty good sign that either it's the fake out of a generation, or it's the real deal. My bet is it's a real deal, given what's going on out there in the world, and the moves with Russia and demand for gold and silver, etc. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see newfound gold head back to its all-time high, it might take a couple of months, obviously, but then it would, in that case, if it hit $13, that would equate to a $195 million position for Novo. And in that case, if Novo went down to 80 cents, basically, as I see it, is like, okay, you're paying 197 million for everything that Novo has, including a position which I think will reach 195 million in value again, and who knows, maybe higher than that with time. So this just becomes an outrageous value play, in my opinion. I mean, I think it's gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper all the way down. And I mean, let's think of the worst case scenarios. Venus Creek would need to be a money loser forever. They would not be able to find any new feed. They would not get permits for the fresh ore. And then newfound gold would have to basically go up in smoke at the same time. I mean, it's, in my opinion, I just find that not to be very likely at all. At least not as likely as the Mr. Market seems to be pricing it in. And if we go down, I mean, I've been preparing myself to add in Novo again, and my plan up until now was that, okay, I expect the market's focus is all obviously on BC. Novo, I expected BC's update, the financial results for Novo, to be poor again, and here we are. The thing is, obviously, we're investing in the future and not the past, and those results covered last year. So if it would drop to 80 cents, then again, in my opinion, I think there's a pretty decent chance that what I bought here will get paid for by newfound gold alone one day, and I would, in that case, in the future, in hindsight, have bought everything that Novo has, including the other equities, and a mill with a replacement value of, let's say, 200 to 300 million for free, and get all the projects obviously along with it. That's a value proposition and risk reward I can't really say no to, because obviously the cheaper Novo gets, especially since it's getting cheap in really absolute terms, I mean relative to everything they have, I think they've been cheap for a long time. But if it drops to, again, 197, so even if where newfound gold is trading right now, I mean, again, that's with all the equities, etc., that's like 64 million for everything Novo has. So when you're getting to those kind of numbers, that is a bit higher than the cash Novo has. So let's say, for simplicity, let's say 80 million. Novo would get down to 80 million in kind of equity. In that case, I mean, to move the needle for 80 million, that's not too hard. I mean, if they would find some other feed, if they made, I don't know, 10 million a year someday, that's a PE of 8. Well, not PE, but like, let's say, EV per EV per EBITDA would be ridiculously low in a hurry. And I mean, that's what basically they have been doing. I mean, they drilling Genie, they're drilling the Parnell Venture Trend. These are all, most of this is on mining leases. So you wouldn't need, I mean, with 100,000 ounces, for example, that could be put through the mill. That should be able to be positive cash flow. I mean, assuming that the Beaton's Creek deposit itself is the main issue, and not the mill or anything like that, because again, like Millennium Minerals made good bank on oxides in a much lower gold environment, and when they were mining refractory ore, they had a bunch of problems, like I think they were trucking water, for example. Novo doesn't have that problem, and Novo has obviously made some improvements to the mill, etc. So I don't know, maybe they could even, start to, if need be, start to dig up some of Millennium's prospects. I guess my point is that I don't see how Novo with equity positions worth, let's say 134 million, and I think that's going to revalue higher, that they can't get something into the Bearens Creek mill that can turn some kind of profit before they've spent all that. It's possible, sure. I just don't see it. I think the risks are to the upside in that case. And then, of course, I mean, given, again, let's say it does drop, so you have like 80 million in equity. When things get cheap, even lesser exploration targets, etc., could really move the needle. I mean, the neighbor up here, the Andover Azure, which belongs to Azure Minerals. I mean, they have put out a maiden resource recently, I think, maybe yesterday even. They have a market cap of 110 million based on their nickel findings. So again, that would be worth more than Novo's equity if it went to, let's say, 80 cents. My point is that when Novo was at, let's say, 800 million, was obviously a lot harder to move the needle. Then you would need to find another Hemi worth like 2 billion or whatever the gray mining is worth right now. But when you're down to these levels in absolute terms, pretty much anything could start going right, and that would have a meaningful impact for an investor. Obviously, these are the Hemi targets along trend from Hemi. They're given where that nickel has gone absolutely bananas, and their nickel discoveries right next to Novo's tenures here. Obviously, that you can't really turn a blind eye to that, because it's I would say beyond neurology play. I mean, it's basically it's Novo's land here is basically sitting in between two nickel prospects or discoveries, and from the same intrusion that runs between. So I mean, what is highlighted is Novo's part of this intrusion. So that's beyond neurology. That's like withinology, if that's even a word. Obviously, there's some value to that. Could perhaps sell it. Could perhaps JV it out. And again, if you're down to like 80 million, I mean, at 10 million in value, if you created that's 1/8 in value creation or return on your equity. Of course, have the Malmesbury project. I mean, they are hunting another Fosterville here, so it's like, again, at 800 million, they would need probably to find half a Fosterville, whatever, to really move the needle for Novo. Not anymore, because Novo's so cheap, and I think it might get cheaper tomorrow. Then they have, I mean, the whole Pilbara basically. They still have all the conglomerate assets, and I think there's a reason why they haven't let go of all this land, because as I see it, ore sorting, etc., is basically an option. If they can, given the equities, etc., they have now, if they just get the Bearens Creek mill or Golden Eagle mill up and running with some new feed, etc., and Millennium were able to get it into positive cash flow territory when they mined oxide gold from the Mosquito Creek targets here. I don't see how Novo wouldn't be able to do that. Sure, it might, I don't know when, but it's like the Beedons Creek deposit itself, if that is the real problem, etc., there are ways for Novo to they're already working on stuff that could go into the Golden Eagle mill. That's of course not really much of a topic of discussion in the forums, and as I said before, I'm not long Novo because the Beedons Creek deposit. I'm long Novo because so got them cheap, and I think they will, given this, that will allow them to get something into the Golden Eagle mill that will make a profit. And the larger case, the real case for me for Novo is still the exploration potential. And again, the Beedons Creek deposit is just this blip here. This is all I'm getting for 100 million right now. Let's say maybe even less than 100 million if we have a washout tomorrow. I just can't say no to that kind of risk reward because we don't know if sorters, how well sorters will work, etc. But if there's even a chance in hell that sorters will work, and if you can even turn 1% of all these, conglomerate targets, etc., and they've been finding more, turn a profit of that someday. If I would say that my blue sky dream case, which has always been my, let's say, main case for Novo, what I get really greedy about is that Novo is able to keep all this conglomerate land, and obviously all the tens or more than tens, basically a bunch of projects, including Telga. That one I typically forget about. That's Nugget gold, could possibly be sorted or at least trucked to the mill. So there's just so many targets and prospects that is hard to keep in mind at any given time. And again, the cheaper Novo gets any of these targets, and if we're talking about conglomerate targets, that would coincide with a favorable outcome for ore sorting, obviously. But even just the conventional targets, be it gold or I don't know what every target here is actually, but like this is obviously nickel, etc. But the cheaper Novo gets, any of these can start moving the needle. Whereas before, like let's say Novo was at 800 million, one of these targets could not really move the needle. But back to my point, my blue sky scenario for Novo, my dream case scenario is basically for Novo to figure out ore sorting and use it to be able to mine conglomerate gold sometime in the future. And if they hold on to this, then again, it's like I've said before, then in my opinion, obviously there's a reason why they are keeping all this land. They're not dumb. It's like with the shale basin, for example. Before anyone knew how to, let's say, extract shale oil, if you owned a shale basin which was located underneath you, that would be worthless. But all of a sudden, when you figure out how to actually recover oil from shale, recover shale oil, the value of those properties shot up immensely in price, obviously. So that's my long-term unconventional blue sky. Then we have all the Hemite targets, Malmesbury, the lode gold deposits here, nickel targets, etc. And then of course we have the lag gravels, but that ties into ore sorting as well. But it's just, as I see it, this is almost a free option. It's becoming almost a free option of Hardy Formation conglomerates, Mount Roe conglomerates, Egina lag gravels combined with ore sorting. And if ore sorting works for other stuff as well, then that could be used for, let's say, Talga, and maybe some other nuggety gold prospects. So it's in my opinion the how should I put this? There is no blue sky scenario for any junior that really comes close from a really long-term perspective, that comes close to Novo. The trick is obviously if and when you have to discount for time value, money value of time, or the time value of money is how you put it. That I don't know, but it's like theoretically, let's say, I mean, since technology gets better and better, and obviously we appear to be going into a long-term commodity bull market, because basically every country in the world is indebted to it up to its ears. So hard assets is making a comeback, and the thought of owning all of this, and there's even a chance in hell that ore sorting could unlock these nuggety gold fields and potentially use up the Golden Eagle mill with combining feeds, let's say, after shrinking it with ore sorting. I mean, that's just a very attractive prospect to me, and especially when I'm not paying anything for it. So I'm still of the opinion that even though, I mean, the narrative is that Novo is dead and buried, etc., I'm still of the opinion that from here, on a long-term basis, Novo has the potential to be one of the best investments I've ever made. And that is far from a guarantee, but it's like when most people look at a short like this, it's dead and buried. Share price is saying it's dead and buried. I'm looking at, okay, I'm barely paying anything anymore for any of the blue sky potential. I mean, it's certainly not even covering the cost of the mill and the equities, etc. So if they turned around the Beatons Creek operation with nearby mill feed or whatever, I could make good money on Novo. If newfound gold went up and kept going, etc., I expect to at least let's say break even if they sold everything else pretty much. But if in terms of absolute blue sky, that's like I'm getting all that still for free, and it sure has been a slow pace and everything has taken way longer than I expected, etc. But at the same time, we have had a pandemic. Western Australia has been locked down. Beatons Creek has caused a lot more problems than one was anticipated. It sure has underperformed relative to my expectations, but that doesn't take anything away from the other stuff, obviously, but it takes away the pace of unlocking it, etc. But none of the conglomerates here have run away because the Beatons Creek deposit is underperforming. So a lot of rests, one part rests with, the unconventional part rests with ore sorting. So that's going to be, hell of interesting to see if that works out. And I mean, in my opinion, if there comes a day in a not too distant future where they show that, hey, ore sorting works, and they even, mine, I don't know, have that bulk sample or whatever, they were going to test mine per this reward, I think. When was that? I don't remember. Let's say Q4 of this year. If they show that they can profitably mine like 30,000 tons with an ore sorter, I mean, then all of a sudden, all the conglomerate prospects become live, and that's a whole bunch of conglomerate prospects over a, there's tens of kilometers of trend. So a lot of things can change in a heartbeat in my opinion. And the best part is that I'm not paying anything for it. And again, the worst case scenario is that Beaton's Creek continues to underperform. They keep losing money. Newfound Gold goes nowhere. None of the other equity holdings go anywhere. None of the other prospects pay off at all. Not the nickel targets, not Telga Telga, none of Genie, the Vulture, Parnell Trend. Ore sorting is bust, so every conglomerate plus Egina Gravels are a no-go, etc. I just don't see that to be too likely. And again, the risk reward is what happens if, let's say the bears or bashers are wrong. What if they hit that Malmesbury? What if they can find mill feed and turn Beaton's Creek, the Beaton's Creek operation into a profitable business all of a sudden? Then Novo would be cheap just based on Beaton's Creek and Newfound Gold. So there's, the cheaper it gets, the more upside surprises start to materialize. Because again, as on a standalone basis, these prospects might not be worth too much, especially if you would have a market cap of 800 million. But if you even find 200,000 of ounces and can recover that, given how cheap Novo is right now and how cheap it could become if we have a washout, maybe those could pay for the whole thing alone, because you have a mill that would, cost let's say 300 million to build today. So if you find 200,000 ounces of acceptable margins, obviously you wouldn't build a $300 mill to recover 200,000 ounces, but it's already there. So that's the beauty of again, it's like that you actually have some real assets yes, there's cost creep, but that's already built, it's already there. So it actually, it's not hurting Novo as much as a developer that's, needs to actually build and spend the capex to actually get a mine up and running. So I think there's a silver lining working for Novo in that respect. So yeah, I mean, I can't guarantee anything. Sure, I didn't expect Novo to get all the way down here, but like I said before, and I always say, I mean, I'm pretty good at buying low. I mean, I have no problem buying low, and of course the future, we don't know. There's a broad spectrum of scenarios. Novo might, could go to shit. Beaton's Creek could, the Beaton's Creek operation could turn around. Maybe they make some discoveries. Maybe conglomerate. Ore sorting shows promise, and then all the conglomerate targets are live, etc., and yada yada yada. So like, I'm not dealing with absolutes here. I don't know the future. I just know when something appears to be very cheap and the risk reward of the bet appears to be increasingly good. And again, my current thinking is that I'm actually hoping for a flush out tomorrow, because I just wired some money, and then I'll, if there's not anything else that looks even more attractive, then I'll probably, then I'll probably add in Novo, because from a long-term perspective, I know I will add for the family portfolios at least. I'm a bit more tactical nowadays. I'm tactical from the perspective that, okay, there are unconventional plays that, let's say, I think they'll do better in the, I don't know, medium term or whatever. But for the hodl portfolios, basically good, solid long-term risk-reward bets. I've actually bought for a few portfolios, bought more Novo, and I just expect to be buying a bit more if it actually, drops in line of what I could hope for. And of course, I mean, point also is that it's like, don't have such a big position that it could destroy you. I mean, you should always never have more than it could go to zero. It's like, again, I don't know what it's gonna happen to Novo. I know that my current position won't kill me, but I still want a position that reflects the, in my opinion, favorable risk reward. And if things turn out well, maybe again, I'm still open to the possibility that since I've been lowering my average, that from here Novo could still be one of the better performers for me over the longer term. And anything could happen. That's the point. I just know that I'm not paying much at all for everything you get in Novo, and how the ships fall, that I do not know. But regardless of how good the risk reward is, you should not be all in or have a position that could kill you. I mean, there's some stories I absolutely love that I consider perhaps even a less risk in the short term, etc. Because they don't have debt and along those lines. But I still won't have, in my opinion, too big of a position, because I don't want to end up in a scenario where it's like you're right on the gold bull and the mining bull, but you only own one stock, and for whatever reason things went south. I hope it brought some perspective that, and again, this is not investing advice. I sure have been wrong on the direction of no, and a lot of I expected a lot of events to play out different as well, because like I've been saying, I mean, share price doesn't necessarily reflect the value of the company. I mean, I think Novo is dirt cheap right now, and I think it might become even cheaper, but the market obviously is focusing on Beaton's Creek, etc. And Beaton's Creek has not been performing. But with that said, past is the past. We can only make informed bets based on what we know and look at the risk reward. It's like, if you pay 0 for a lottery ticket that has 1 in a million chance to pay off even $1, if you could, you would play that hand, buy that lottery ticket for free an infinite amount of times, because the risk was 0. The risk surely isn't 0 in Novo, but that's never the case with any stock, and I simply think there's increasing risks to the upside as long as the price of the company goes lower, especially again in light of stuff like newfound gold, etc. Thanks for listening. Always do your own due diligence. I own shares of No Resources. Family members own shares. Don't invest money you can't afford to lose. Don't invest an amount that, if it goes sideways, because there's you're gonna own a bunch of companies that goes sideways. Don't risk that, in my opinion. And they are a sponsor of my site, so consider me biased. And again, like, always make up your own thoughts. If you completely disagree with me, that's 100% fine. You should do what you think is best for you, because if you don't know why you're selling or buying, then you won't know when or why you should sell or buy, flip the position, let's say. Thanks for listening. Bye.